I'm Barry Shaw. This is the view from Israel. Many of you know, of course, who doesn't know, that Israel has been in an exhaustive war in Gaza in order to try and eradicate Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror groups after their genocidal attack against Israel and Jews on the 7th of October 2023. We're coming into what we hope is the final stage, which would be the siege of Gaza City, in which we will try to evacuate as many of the population as we can and complete this war. Of course, the war could end today or tomorrow if Hamas releases our hostages and prepare to surrender. In the meantime, there have been other developments, both in our region, in which the Western democratic socialist ideologies, I don't know what to call them, are going to the United Nations to claim they want to declare recognition of a Palestinian state, at which they will be applauded and supported by all the dictators and of the undemocratic world. But there is some light in the darkness of the tunnel here, and I want to speak to one particular expert who can help us. So I welcome to the show Dr. Mordechai Kedar. Welcome.
Hi, Barry. Thank you for having me here.
I have to admit to the viewers that I may be a little bit older than you, but I always look on you as a mentor. And you helped me to come into the light when I was lost and confused, when I came with my John Lennon views of give peace a chance and we persuade the government to give them our land and everything because they're going to be peaceful neighbors, and this is what they tell us they're all about. I think you're familiar with that. The other thing, of course, they tell me is that really we have done terrible things to the poor Palestinians. We've driven them off their land, etc., etc. So with your permission, granted your knowledge, I'd like, for my sake, for the viewer's sake, to play a little quiz with you in that I want to give you a list of Palestinian family names that I have heard. And please tell me where they originate from, whether it's places like Ra'anana or Netanya or Tel Aviv or Jaffa. So let's begin with this, okay? Family name is Al-Nasri, who were quite popular in the Shechem and Nablus area. Where does Al-Nasri come from?
Nasri means Egyptian, somebody who came from Egypt. Masarwa as well. Fayumi is from Fayum in Egypt, and many other names, which actually Egyptian names. And this actually was because of the influx of people from Egypt who came to this country at the mid-19th century because they ran away from the French, who caught Egyptians in the streets in order to enslave them in digging the Suez Canal. So many Egyptians ran away to the Ottoman Empire, means to this country, and settled in this place in order to run away from the French. And today they present themselves as indigenous people.
Yep. How about the names Horani and Sorani?
Horani is from southern Syria, the Horan area. Sorani is from the city of Sor, means Tyre, in Lebanon, and on the seashore. And there are names like Tarabulsi, which is from Tripoli in Lebanon, and Dibini, which is also from the village named Dibin in Lebanon, and many other names, which actually Lebanese names, which came many to them north of Israel.
I would assume that the Palestinian name Iraqi means they come from Iraq.
Mainly from Iraq. By the way, Halabi which is also a very common name within the Arab population here in Eretz Israel, is from Aleppo in northern Syria. Now, all of them, look, there are families who came from Libya, like Durmush from Gaza, and Hijazi, another big family here in wherever you go. Hijazi means somebody from the Hijaz, means in western Saudi Arabia, where Mecca and Medina are. You have Kurdi from Kurdistan, usually in the Iraqi part of Kurdistan, and Yemeni, which is from Yemen, and Sudani, from Sudan, usually people who look like Africans, and many, many other names, Mughrabi. You know, the terrorist, Dalal Mughrabi, the lady who was among the terrorists who killed like 30 Israelis on the shore road, road number 2. Well, Mughrabi means somebody from the Maghreb, from Morocco, Jazairi, from Algeria, and many other names which testify. Bushnak, there is a name who is actually from Bosnia, what was formerly Yugoslavia. So many names testify that the people, or most of them at least, who the Arabs who live in the land of Israel actually are not indigenous, and we should use this information. Unfortunately, the world is not aware of it. And thanks to you, Barry, more and more people all over the world will know this fact and maybe rethink their support to the Palestinian nation.
And I would claim, and I think you maybe back me up with this, that they were attracted here, but actually by the industry of the Jews over here, who were developing a barren land which had remained barren even throughout the whole of the Ottoman Empire period until they were driven out in 1917. And you have things like, for instance, the Palestine Water Company, or electric company that was created by some Arab from somewhere called Pinchas Rothenberg, actually a Jew, the Palestine Post, the Palestine Bank, the Palestine Orchestra, the Palestine football team, all Jewish, but they weren't attracted, the Arabs, by that, but in fact they were attracted by the wide-scale agricultural development that had been going on for decades before, and they were attracted over here, I would suggest, by the possibility of work and employment and a better life over here that they were getting than the desolate places they were coming from. So I would suggest that, for instance, our viewers should really understand that the Palestinians who claim that they are refugees driven out by people like you, Mordechai Kedar, a white European colonialist, is a total lie. And what, go ahead.
Look, they claim that we are invaders who were brought by the British to a land which was full of residents until then. Well, if you read the books of people who were here in the 19th century, you can definitely see that this land was almost, first of all, it was covered with swamps in Israel and the Hadera area. Nobody lives near swamps because of the Anopheles mosquitoes which bring malaria. So this was, most parts of this country were wasteland, let alone the Negev, the south, which was a dry, arid desert, which we turned into a flourishing country as we feed the Europeans through the winter with peppers and all kinds of other vegetables which we grow in the Arava, part of the desert in the south. Okay, so when we came, we started to dry up the swamps in Emek Israel and in Hadera area. We dried up the Hula to the north from the Kinneret, which was another kind of swamps. Yes, and we turned this wasteland into a flourishing country after millennia of being under the hands of the Muslims who invaded this country in 638, 37, 38 CE. And this is what happens when the indigenous people return to their homeland. The homeland actually flourishes with these people, with us, after it was a wasteland under the others.
Well, you say return, but let me give you and our viewers a statistic that I got that at the turn of the 18th, 19th century, the last sort of survey seemed to show that the population of what was then called Ottoman Turkish Palestine, which included places like Syria over the border, which is Jordan, and our area over here, which included Lebanon, the population in total was about 460,000 people. So basically, Mark Twain was right when he talked about a desolate country. However, when the British took over in 1917, one of the early things they did in 1922 was decide to hold a survey in Jerusalem to see what constituted the population of Jerusalem. And they made three categories for the people that they canvassed, if you want to call it there: Jews, Christians, and Muslims. They found there was a total in 1922 in Jerusalem had a population of 62,578. You can go to Wikipedia or go to records to find this, of which the Jews were a majority, over 50%, with 33,971. Now, this may surprise you. The Muslims didn't even come in second place. The Christians were second, with 14,699, and the Muslims came in third with only 13,413. That's not a Jewish survey. That was a British survey who wanted to find out what constituted the population of Jerusalem at that time.
Well, this is also was discovered by a French guy who was here named Baedeker, who was towards the end of the 19th century and also gave numbers which show the same picture. Also, this picture comes out from the sigil, which the books of the Ottoman Sharia court of Jerusalem, which was also in charge of taxation. And taxation, as you know, was personal taxation in those days. And the records of the taxation show that, of the Ottoman taxation, show that the majority of the people in Jerusalem are Jews, because the Jews paid different taxes or more taxes than others. So you have multi-facet proof that the population of Jerusalem at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century was with a Jewish majority. And definitely you can talk about ethnic cleansing for what was in Jerusalem and Hebron also. People who were in Hebron were massacred in 1929, not because they were not there, because they were there. Okay, so to say that we are invaders also in Jerusalem and Hebron, let alone other parts, is more or less rewriting the history. However, when I come to Arabs and tell them all this data, they keep claiming one thing, that everything was forged by the Zionists. All these data are forgeries of Jews. Not only this, when I come with all kinds of things from the Bible, which, you know, Christian Arabs also accept. So the Muslims, sometimes I heard this, I couldn't believe, that they say that the Bible was authored by the Jews after 1948 in order to justify the Zionist campaign. It's such a stupid thing to say. What? There are translations of the Bible to Greek from the 3rd century BCE to translation to Latin, the Vulgata, from the 1st century CE, and who knows how many more translations from the Middle Ages to all kinds of languages, English, Spanish, Portuguese, and whatever. Okay, so all these translations also were authored by the Zionists after 1948, let alone the music pieces like the creation of Joseph Haydn, all the Handel wrote his Messiah Mass. Start with "Comfort ye my people" from Isaiah 40 in the Old Testament. So this was also, Haydn was also authored by the Zionists after 1948. Okay, so this allegation that the Bible was written after 1948 is so stupid that not many people quote it, but there are people who believe it.
If you're talking about false identities and where you come from, I think this is personified by a gentleman known as Yasser Arafat, who that's not his proper name, and he wasn't a Palestinian. Maybe you can throw some light on the origins of Yasser Arafat.
Well, his mother is from the family of Husseini in Jerusalem, but he was born in Egypt.
Yeah. But I know that Al-Husseini, when he escaped the Allies because he was planning the final solution of the Jewish problem in the Middle East with Hitler, and he had to run away. He went to Egypt, and he gave the Al-Banna form of Muslim Brotherhood to indoctrinate people. And one of his students, if you like, was an Egyptian young man called Yasser Arafat, but perhaps you remember his original name. His original name wasn't Yasser Arafat.
And
he was Egyptian.
Yeah, and he adopted the Palestinian dialect.
Exactly.
However, when he became older, he returned to his Egyptian dialect, which is totally different from the Palestinian one. And it was rather embarrassing for his people around him that he's speaking in Egyptian, and they couldn't correct it because he actually lost his ability to speak in the Palestinian because for him it was new, while the Egyptian was much more profound in his mind. And this is what happens to people with dementia, that they return to all kinds of early stages in their life, which are more deeply engraved into their personality and memory. So he returned to the Egyptian, and it was very embarrassing for them because of this.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to go dwell on this subject, but while I've got you on, you can help me with something, because I was led to believe that Yasser Arafat, after we allowed him back from exile in Tunis, on the way back, he went into a mosque or mosques in Egypt and in Johannesburg. And he also sort of personified himself as a sort of modern secular freedom fighter on behalf of the Arab movement. This was before he really adopted the Palestinian cause. However, he gave something away, and I need you to clarify this, that even he, acting like, if you like, a far left secular freedom fighter, actually, when it came down to it, was still endowed with the radical Islamic hatred of Jews, because when they were criticizing him at the mosque that he was invited to, he took a piece of paper and waved it in the air and said, "Please understand, this is nothing that I signed except the Treaty of Hudaybiyyah, which Muhammad signed with the Jews." I think you can throw light on that particular incident. Was it Egypt? Was it Johannesburg? And have you heard about this story?
Well, just to continue the story, the recording of what Arafat said in Johannesburg came to Israel like a week later. It took it a week to come from Johannesburg to Israel. However, it was concealed by the Israeli authorities for some 10 years because they knew that what it said is actually undermining the credibility of the agreements. And the Israeli government then under Rabin and Peres and was heavily influenced by Yossi Beilin and Alon Liel, they actually decided to hide this speech. However, Arafat, when he was here, he was talking about Hudaybiyyah peace time after, every time when he saw a microphone. I have recordings of Arafat talking about this several times, which I have, and there are many others which were not recorded. And here in Israel, people kept telling us that he's saying it only for domestic consumption. Now, what is the Hudaybiyyah agreement? Hudaybiyyah is a village between Mecca and Medina. The Muhammad, when he ran away from Mecca, it was the Hijrah, means the migration. It was in the year 622 CE. He went to Medina. He took over the city in 2 years later, and he prepared an army to occupy Mecca and to burn all the idols in Mecca. He, in the year of 628, 6 years after the Hijrah, he felt that he was strong enough, and he took his army down to Mecca. The Meccans had a good intelligence, and they knew what he is preparing. So they prepare a bigger army with longer swords and with very young camels who are running very fast. And then two armies met each other near a village named Hudaybiyyah between Mecca and Medina. Muhammad, when he saw this giant army in front of him, he understood that if he messes with this army, this will be the last thing which he's doing during his life. It means he will be killed. He and his army and his community. So he sat with them, negotiated with them peace, and came to an agreement for peace for 9 years, 9 months, and 9 days. Almost 10 years. They went back to Mecca, he went back to Medina. They waited for a year, 2 years. And when they saw that he doesn't attack them, they assumed that he means peace. And so they took the camels and they went to business in India, in Asia Minor, which today is Turkey. And they left the city almost without any guards. So when Muhammad understood that they left the city, he took his little army and he ran to Mecca, burnt all the idols, took all the women, slaughtered everyone who didn't convert to Islam. And this was the end of the almost 10-year peace after 2 years only. From this, the jurists of Islam learned two things. One thing, that if you're Muslim, if you're the Muslim, you are weak, and your enemy, the infidel, is strong, you can make peace with him because you cannot defeat him. This is one thing. The second thing is that if Allah, with His mercy, gives you, the Muslim, the ability and the opportunity to hit the infidel, you can do it. And you are allowed to do this even within the time of the temporary peace. Because Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, the one who was infallible, Ma'soom in Arabic, who was Mahdi, who was directed by Allah, if he did it, of course, everyone should do it because he is the role model for every Muslim in every situation which he finds himself in. So this is the basis, by the way, of the peace between us and Egypt, because Sadat also based his Camp David agreements and the peace agreement between Israel and Egypt in 1979 on a fatwa, means a religious verdict, which was issued by the Al-Azhar, means the supreme Islamic authority of Egypt, which was given to him, which allows him to make peace with the Zionists based on the peace which Muhammad the Prophet of Islam, signed with the infidels of Mecca in Hudaybiyyah. I didn't find the Hudaybiyyah in the Jordanian context of 1994, but Arafat, I didn't look for it as well. But Arafat, when it came to Oslo agreements in 1993, definitely was speaking about the Hudaybiyyah peace time after time. And he thought that Israel is weak enough in 2000, when we ran away from Lebanon under the leadership of the Prime Minister Ehud Barak. And this gave Arafat the feeling that now is the time, because we ran away from Lebanon, it was end of May 2000. And he started the second intifada in September of that year, means 4 months later, when he understood that Israel is weak enough to run away from Lebanon because of more or less 30 soldiers' casualties every year. So if he gives us the same rate of casualties in Judea and Samaria, Israel will run away from Judea and Samaria. This was his assumption. Well, he was wrong. But the second intifada, which cost the life of like 1,000 Israelis, was the result of the irresponsible withdrawal of Ehud Barak from Lebanon, which convinced Arafat to cancel his temporary peace from 1993.
Well, the real what is the Arab word for deception? Is it taqiyya?
Taqiyya is to be careful.
Ah, no, okay.
You can make face as if you are Sunni, if you are a Shia, but you are afraid that if the Sunni environment will find out that you are a Shia, they will slaughter you. So you can make face as if you are Sunni, to behave and to act like a Sunni. And this, the framework is the taqiyya, to be careful, not to expose your real identity.
The reason I ask that is because Yasser Arafat, if you remember, in his public statements in English, was promising us peace of the brave when he actually delivered to us peace of the grave. And I remember you, after he sent 8 suicide bombers to my hometown of Netanya, that I took off my rose-tinted left-wing glasses and looked at things through reality. And this is where I came into contact with you, looking for answers. Because by that time, it occurred to me that although Yasser Arafat had promised to give us peace of the brave, he gave us peace of the grave, and actually he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
Right.
The fact is that Yasser Arafat killed more Jews after he was awarded a peace prize than he ever killed before.
Look, I am not impressed by the Nobel Peace Prize. The President of America, Barack Hussein Obama, received this prize before he did anything, only because he was talking about peace. And later, when he withdrew the American army from Iraq, turned out that Iran became a mayhem. So to turn Iraq into a mayhem, it deserves a Nobel Prize for Peace. So this is totally politicized. And President Trump, by the way, who brought about the Abraham Accords with the Emirates and the in Bahrain and Morocco, he didn't get it, the Nobel Prize for Peace. So definitely it's highly politicized.
What do you see as an alternative? If this is what the United Nations are imposing on us.
Let me tell you a secret. Already, there are people in the Palestinian Authority who are very angry at France and Britain and Australia and all these, because what these people in the PA want is for them to declare a Palestinian state on the entire land. As the Palestinians keep showing, on their maps which they draw. And this is the PA, it's not even Hamas. And this is the land of Israel, Palestine as they call it, from the river to the sea. And since France and the others will not declare that Palestinian is from the river to the sea, they don't want it. Because if they declare now, let's say the state of Palestine, with Judea and Samaria, and maybe Gaza as well, this is against the Palestinian plan to take over the whole country. So they are against it to that degree. So this is one thing. Yep. Second thing, what Israel should do, and very quickly, is to go forward with the sheikhs of Hebron, the old people of Hebron, who want to declare statehood for Hebron, emiratehood, because they want to refrain or they want to work anything which possible against the Palestinian state, because they are afraid that the Palestinian state will turn into another Hamastan. Because they remember what happened in January 2006, when Hamas actually won the elections to Legislative Council of the Palestinian Authority, and therefore, until this very day, Hamas has the majority of the seats in the Palestinian Legislative Council. This can repeat itself time and again when the PA will turn into a state. So the state will turn into another Hamastan. And everybody remembers what happened also in June 2007, when Hamas took Gaza over by force. It also can happen here. Means either by elections or by force, the future Palestinian state will inevitably turn into a Hamas state. And Hamas state will finish like Gaza, because the jihad in their genes. They cannot be peaceful with Israel. They cannot accept Israel. And what Israel will do to them in Judea and Samaria is exactly what Israel is doing to the Gazans. And they don't want such a future. So they decided to depart from the Palestinian Authority and to establish their own emirate, which will join the Abraham Accords, will live peacefully with Israel. Of course, Israel will be in charge of security around Hebron, and nobody should, fall asleep on God. And this is the only solution which is sustainable for decades or centuries even, because it's based on the clan system, which is very strong in the Palestinian Authority, and particularly in Hebron. They actually want to emulate the paradigm on which the Gulf Emirates are built, the clans. And this is the only thing which works well in the Arab world. When you establish a state on Western ideas like nationalism, patriotism, socialism, democracy, and all these ideas which came from the West, they don't work in the Middle East. Nowhere is there democracy in the Arab world. Nowhere is a real socialism. Nowhere is a real nationalism. Look, Syria was built on a Syrian national idea. Look at what Syria is today. If they had succeeded in their national efforts, they wouldn't slaughter each other as they do. Same thing in Iraq, Yemen, Sudan, Libya. All these failing states are because they were built by local people who studied in the West and internalized Western ideas and Western methods and Western kind of thinking, while all these things do not work in the Middle East, and therefore these countries are failures. The only successful countries in the Arab world are the Emirates in the Gulf, including Kuwait and Bahrain and Oman and Saudi Arabia, because they are built on clans. And this is the same thing which the people in Hebron want to establish. And Israel should embrace this idea and cooperate with it fully and totally.
I think there are one or two people, influential people, who are on board with this idea. I don't know whether in this conversation you want to name them, but also beyond that, do you see any possibility of this extending to other areas in Judea and Samaria?
Not only this. First of all, a minister who is identified with this is Nir Barkat. I'm sitting with him at least 5 years already on this plan. And he is the Trojan horse, if to use it in a good context, of this idea in the government. Netanyahu is aware of it. He's not against it. Dermer is for it. He's not against it. The Ministry of Defense also, Israel Katz, is not against it. But the decision to divert the work from the PA to the notables in Hebron has not yet been taken. So this is what we should do now, and it should be within days before the General Assembly of the United Nations decides to embrace a Palestinian state with all the hardships which they can find. I already got emails and phone calls from Iraq. People want to adopt the same idea, to divide Iraq to emirates, local emirates. In Syria as well, people are talking about this because, you know, the media brought this idea across the Arab world, all across the Arab world. So people are starting to talk about this idea in Sudan and Yemen, and maybe this is some kind which will bring some kind of remedy to the Middle East by dividing the dysfunctional entities, named the Arab states, to functional, flourishing emirates, which will emerge from the ruins of the states.
Okay, yeah, I was somehow briefly involved also with regard to Iraq when it came to protecting the Yazidis and the Kurds who were being persecuted by their local equivalent of Hamas. But the final question, do you see any possibility that this idea that you are working on over here taking root? I believe it's taking root already in Gaza. And could that be a potential replacement for Hamas leadership in Gaza?
I think that this is the only solution for Gaza as well. Because, look, if Israel really wants to defeat Hamas, Israel must go and vet every person in Gaza to check whether there's Hamasnik or not, because they don't go around with the uniforms or with the cards. So, and this is totally impossible. Not only this, Israel will have to go to all the tunnels, into those tunnels in order to catch the remnants of Hamas. If really Israel wants to get rid of Hamas altogether, this is totally impossible. Both things. Therefore, only the local clans, if they really want to get rid of Hamas, they can do the job. Not for us, for them, in order to be liberated from Hamas. And this is what they should do.
But you already have clans, actually, who are openly opposing Hamas, even putting themselves at risk, for instance, in places like Rafah and other places. So your idea of the clans and families, actually, tell us, do you find a similar pattern of clans and families that are I don't want to call it indigenous, maybe, of Gaza, that they are, for instance, constitute places like the ones we have right now in Rafah? Maybe there's other examples.
Yes, we talk about the Abu Shabab clan.
Yeah.
There are some 4 or 5 more clans, which was published recently in Israel Hayom, that they actually are working with the IDF. I won't mention the name; it was mentioned in the news item. Yeah. But yes, there are clans, and they know whom to work with, and they know whom to ask weapons from. And I believe that the Shabak, means the Israeli Security Organization, actually works with them. Or maybe another military unit was named 504, former name. But yes, I do believe that behind the scenes, Israel officially works with families in Gaza, because the army understands that these are the only people who can really fight Hamas.
Actually, this idea, I don't know if you know, Moti, but I released an article that was called a New Gaza for a New Middle East. And this was on the date, you believe it or not, it's at the bottom over here, of December the 23rd, 2023, in other words, less than 2 months after the genocidal attack by Hamas, well, I put my brain in gear to come up, what alternative can we have? And this one actually developed, this idea developed in something that I produced a year later, which was this one, when Trump was elected, that in fact the state should be that having a, what I call an Abraham Accords protectorate operating Gaza to do two things, as the Allies did in Europe, for instance, or in Germany, with the Marshall Plan, to do two things: A, reconstruct the place, but reconstruct it only with, in Germany's case, the denazification. And this has to go on, I'm sure you would agree, in Gaza as well. Without their version of the denazification, it would be a total waste of money reconstructing Gaza. The other example I quote is, of course, the Americans. They actually went further than we're doing in Gaza right now. They, in fact, dropped 2 atom bombs on Japan to make them surrender. The lost forgotten that, right? Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But they afterwards, they decided to move in to rebuild Japan, but it came with also their de-radicalization. And Japan is today perhaps one of the most modern, thriving, democratic countries in all of Asia. So this thing works. And the question, it will only work, I believe, with a good local leadership replacing Hamas. Maybe they won't come out of hiding right now because of the threat of Hamas. But do you agree with me that once we've defeated Hamas, that these are sort of the possibilities? That you, and incidentally, one final sentence, my new Gaza actually ends up being the Abraham Accords protectorate countries, of which we and America will play a part, but certainly with some of the moderate Arab states, would present this new Gaza, unlike what is going to happen in the United Nations next month in September. But when it's reconstructed, and this isn't going to be perhaps in yours or my lifetime, it's going to take 15 years to do so, can be presented to the United Nations as a new state of Gaza, to be, as I said, a new Gaza for a new Middle East. Is that a possibility that you would
It is
support?
a possibility, but don't forget that there's a plan by Trump, first of all, to evacuate Gaza altogether from its people, and to send them somewhere else, and to turn Gaza into a giant harbor on the big corridor, which will start in India in the east and finish in the United States in the west, a corridor for goods and for cars and for trains and communications and whatever can be moved between America in the west and India in the east, through the Mediterranean and Gaza and Israel, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates and the Indian Ocean and so forth. So yes, there are all kinds of plans for Gaza, and I think that the number of plans is more or less the same number of people who bring those plans up.
It's better than those that still cling to a Palestinian Fatah, PLO, or Hamas Islamic Jihad future for both the region and Judea and Samaria. I want to thank Moti for the time and for enlightening us from your experience, and hope to be my guest when things start developing.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. This is Barry Shaw, The View from Israel.
אנחנו מכריזים בזאת